To Old Town Friends. This is Lori, and in this class, we'll be painting this little mixed media canvas to go along with our May theme of Stop and Smell the Flowers. And so I did put that lettering on the banner of the canvas, and then down at the bottom right corner, it says Picking Flowers and Chasing Dreams, which was just a little quote that I found and loved. I hope you'll enjoy painting this project. Um, You've painted enough projects with me by now that you know I love to use book paper in my projects. So I do have the girl painted on a book page. This is from Heidi, although you can use any book or magazine page, dictionary page. You can pick up something from the thrift shop even to use, or just you could paint her directly on the canvas if you don't want to do the collaging step. And then the daisies are also collaged on, but the rest of the flowers are painted directly on the canvas. So she's in her little dreamy garden. So we're going to have a lot of fun creating this really pretty and kind of dreamy magical background to place her in. And I hope you're going to enjoy this project. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so to get started, I have put out all the colors that we're going to use in our background. It's very colorful because we want to have our mixed media girl in her garden. And so we're trying to create kind of a dreamy background with a little bit of greenery in the bottom to blend in with the flowers. So we're going to be doing all of the background wet and wet with stippling. And I'm using this big scruffy brush for my stippling. Just going to show you the brush I'm using. And I tend to pull my bristles apart to really open them so I have a really nice impression with a lot of bristle kind of splayed out. Okay, so since we're going to be adding in all these colors, we're going to use some glazing medium to kind of assist with keeping everything open and giving us a longer drying time. And so I'm just going to tell you what we're doing first, and then we'll do it together. So we're going to base coat the canvas with buttermilk, and we're going to brush through some glazing medium, and that's going to kind of act as a retarder. And then all of these colors are going to be in our background. So before we base coat, we're going to put a little puddle of each of these on our so that we can quickly work in between colors. And you're going to want to have a paper towel handy so that you can pinch your brush out between colors. We won't be going into water and rinsing because we don't want to deal with all that excess moisture in the brush. So we're just going to pinch out the brush and then keep kind of working dirty brush, wet and wet. Okay, so we have sunny day, turquoise, matcha green, white, and desert turquoise. So the first thing I've done is to put a little bit of each of these colors down on my palette. I'm going to refresh my puddles a bit here. So we don't really need very much white. I got carried away with my white puddle. But white, sunny day, here's my turquoise. Matcha green, I already put on. And then desert turquoise, we don't need very much of this either. So I have all my colors handy. I have my brush, my stippling brush ready. I'm going to use a big base coating brush here. Okay, so I'm going to be starting with a nice coat of buttercream. I want a generous coat, but I don't want to have ridges. So it's a little thicker than maybe I normally would base coat, but I'm being careful to not make a mess of it too. We're going to stipple, so I guess ridges are going to get stippled out, but then I'm going to just put a few drops of glazing medium and brush this right in. And this is going to, as I said, give us a slower dry time. Okay, so then it's going to be kind of like on your mark, get set, go. We're going to drop that in our rinse water. I'm going to quickly go right into the sunny day. And I'm going to bring this across the top and down through the center. And zoom in here so you can kind of see a little bit better. And then once I'm stippling, I'm going to pinch out. And then what I want to do is get this to blend in with our buttercream. So this is going to be soft yellow. Okay. and then pinching out my brush and right into the turquoise. And on my palette, I'm pushing these colors together, which is changing the color of the turquoise. And I'm going to do my corners. I'm going to come down my sides and see how that turquoise is just blending right in with the buttercream. So when we end up, our palette is going to be, or our canvas is going to be quite blue and greenish, but the buttercream tones and softens the colors. And then I'm just very lightly bringing this color around. I'm going to pick up a little more turquoise here so I can brighten up my blue. And I'm constantly pinching my brush out so that I'm just blending the color that's on my palette. I'm going to come back towards the middle, blend, 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 and then into my sunny day to force these colors together. So you're just going to keep working back and forth between your colors. Anytime you feel like you're getting overtaken by a color, you can come back into your buttermilk and lighten it up again. See how we're getting the brightness in the center, but our color is shifting and we're seeing a lot of blue. So I'm pinching out, and now I'm going to go into the matcha green. And I'm going to bring matcha green down my lower corners. And you let it grow up the side. This is going to be, our flowers are going to grow out of this area. So I want the greenish down here. I'm pinching out my brush really well. I'm going to bring back in my buttermilk because now I want to start brightening up my center. Because our girl is going to be in the middle here. And pinching, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of white. Again, this is just to brighten it. And I'm really staying on the tips of my bristles with this white, not trying to mash this in with the other colors. Okay, so here we can evaluate. If we are happy with our colors, we're going to go into the desert turquoise. I want to bring a little more of a blue, so I'm going to go back in to my turquoise. And I'm going to kind of repeat this because I want my overall look to be rather blue. But see how the impression of the bristle, you can almost see depth in there. So you can, the turquoise and the sunny day give us a hint of green. So we're just breaking up the sky and it's almost becoming like foliage. Okay, so I'm constantly just scrubbing out my brush. And just for fun, I'm going to just bring a little more sunny day up through here. If this is some sunlight, and scrub out my brush and just blend all of this. I'm really, really liking where this is right now. Now I want to give us some depth. So we're going to go into the desert turquoise. And I'm just kind of tapping up on the tip of my bristle. I pinched my brush out. You can see it's still a dirty brush. And I'm just going to make very light impressions on the corners, down the side, and see how the depth that gives us. It gives us some dark in there, so it's kind of giving us some nooks and crannies. And then especially down here in our greenery. And I'm, again, just staying up on the tips of the bristles, so it's just the bristle impression. And so we don't have the same shape happening all the time. I'm twisting my brush as I work. And then you can just adjust this to your liking. I really like my corners to be darker. So I'm going to keep adding to my corners. And I think I'm pretty happy with where I'm at here. I've got a nice spotlight where she's going to be. I've got some maybe dappled sunlight coming through the top. I have the darker corners where it all fades away. If you want to just bring in any more blues here. If you feel like your yellow's too bright, you can bring in some more blues. I'm not going to be too fussy about it because it's just the background. So you just work with the colors on your palette until you're happy with the way it's looking. And at any time, I just want to show you here, if I pick up buttermilk, I can force it softer by getting our background brought to the surface. So you can soften up any of this as you're working. And every time you add something new, you're creating spaces, whether it's dark spaces or whether it's light spaces. Okay, I think this is where I'm going to stop with mine. And we're going to let this dry. For the next step, we're going to be painting the girl on our book page, and I'm using a page from Heidi. You can use any book paper that you like, whether it be a vintage book or just a book from a thrift store. I happen to find a nice paragraph here. It has the words joy and gratitude, happy, journey, kindness. And so I was able to position my line drawing in such a way that I capture some of those words. And they may not all show up since we're painting on top of them, but I like to just try to sneak in some words like that when I'm able to. So the paper has been prepped with Liquitex Fluid Matte Medium. This seals it. It protects the vintage paper. If you're using regular book paper, you still want to seal it in the same way. If you don't have Liquitex Fluid Matte Medium, you could use clear gesso. I have found that Art Basics brand, Prima Finnabar clear gesso is very smooth. And so that's a really good option if you don't happen to have the matte medium on hand. So we're going to be, we have our paper sealed with matte medium. We're going to be mixing a little matte medium in with our paint as we work to keep things transparent so that we can see some of the text through. And we are going to be doing all of our floating with matte medium in the brush instead of water. So all of this in an attempt to keep our paper from buckling. And so we just want to use the least amount of water as possible. Before I begin with my base coating, I do have my line drawing already applied to the paper. We're going to just apply a thin coat of gesso to mute the text a little bit. You could use white paint for this. I'm going to load my brush in some matte medium, and I'm just going to repeat the matte medium over my book paper and then go ahead and brush my white gesso right into that. You could cover your whole page with gesso, and probably in the directions I will have you do that. I'm just gessoing the part that I'm going to paint on because I kind of forgot I wanted to mute the text a little, but this is a really good way to show you the difference between the paper with the gesso and the paper that has not had gesso applied. So you can see how it just mutes it a little bit. Doesn't give us such dark text showing through. Okay, so I'm going to give this a quick dry. So I put a little matte medium right on my palette, and then I can dip my brush into that as I go. We're going to be using warm beige to base coat our girl. So I'm again loading my brush in some of the matte medium and just work that into my bristles. Pick up the warm beige, and then I'm going to base coat her face and her neck. And you can use whatever brush you're comfortable with for this. I know I'm going to be floating in just a minute, so I grabbed my 1/2-inch angular brush, and we're going to be cutting her out. So staying in the lines is not important. I'm going to try to stay in the lines for your sake so it doesn't get confusing. But if I was just painting this project for myself, I wouldn't be nearly this careful. So we're just tinting the paper with the warm beige for her flesh, and then her little hand down here is going to also be tinted with warm beige, but I'm going to go ahead and base coat her dress first. So for the dress, We have out on our palette the colors from the canvas. So I'm going to just grab some of the matcha green. I'm going to grab some of the sunny day. I'm just doing a brush mix here. I'm going to grab some of the buttermilk, and I just want a light vintage green. And then, of course, some matte medium in my brush. And I'm going to tint her dress with this color, and I am going to work around her hand. Again, its edges not so important because you're going to cut it out anyway. So I'm just going to grab a little filbert brush to get her hand in there with the warm beige. And I'm going to give my girl brown hair. I like to personalize when I do a girl on a canvas. A lot of times I'll give her blonde hair back in the day. Now my hair is getting more gray every day, so I try to gray up the hair a little bit. But today I'm going to do a brown haired girl. So this is a good place for you to personalize it if you'd like to use your own hair color, or if you're thinking of gifting this to someone, you can use their hair color. So I'm going to start with milk chocolate. And then again, I'm just going to load my brush up in matte medium first. And I have my girl in a short hairstyle, but again, you can easily switch this up to a longer hairstyle. You could give her a bun, you could give her ponytails, you could give her a bob, you could give her sweeping hair off the shoulder. I'm just keeping my brush strokes in the same direction that I want the hair. I'm not brushing up and down or left to right here because I want her hair to be coming down from the top of her head. So that's the direction that I'm following, and that way the brush strokes um, become like strands of hair. Okay, so there's our simple little base coat. Now I'm going to take a dry brush. This is a Dynasty 200 series. I love these dry brushes. And we're going to give her some pink cheeks. A lot of times I will float the pink on and kind of go from cheek to cheek around the bottom of the face. But for this gal, we have her neck coming right up, and we're not really giving her a chin because she's going to be smelling the flowers. That's the whole theme of our project. So I'm just going to give her two little rosy cheeks. So she's just kind of a whimsical girl. I'm still going to use coral blush. I also love tea berry for a cheek color if you keep it very soft. So I have just a little dot here, and I'm going to really work this into my dry brush. And then I'm going to scrub off on my paper towel. You can see just a little haze of color here. And I'm going to give her a little circle blush, but I don't want to just scrub my brush in a circle like this because I don't want to dig a hole. So I'm still going to be, I'm stroking kind of left to right. I'm just keeping it kind of rounded. Okay, so we're just giving her this little bit of blush, two spots. And then I have some hand sanitizer on my table, always. Just going to squirt a little bit in my hand, and I'm going to just work this into the dry brush and pinch it out. And that way I don't have a wet dry brush and I can use it again very quickly. I'm going to pinch this out after I cleaned it with the hand sanitizer, and the alcohol just evaporates out very quickly and will leave you with a nice dry brush. Okay, so let's come back and shade her face down the sides of her neck. We're going to use dried clay for this. Just need one little dot on your palette because, again, we're going to have the matte medium loaded up in our brush, so a little bit goes a long way, especially when we're floating. So again, I'm just going to pick up matte medium in my brush. I'm going to just put a small amount of dried clay and really blend this out. The blending is the key. We want to keep the color very soft. And I'm going to go from the part all the way down the sides of her face and down her neck. Okay, so you can just see the depth that we get. I have a little bit of space here between my float and her hair. Normally, I would want to fill that in, but because we're going to pull some strands of hair and darken her hair, I'll capture that space. I'll fill that in with hair. I'm going to give this a dry so we can float the other side. Keep it very soft. And then down at the bottom of the neck, against the shirt. And I'm going to come around her hand. The hand's just kind of a little oval. And against the sleeve. And while we're down here, we can go ahead and start working on the shading on her dress. I'm going to use Lush Green for this. It's kind of a dark yellowy green, which works perfectly with the mix that we made. If you don't have Lush Green, you could use avocado or something like that. You just want a yellowy green. I like the Lush Green because it's a little darker and a little brighter. So she does have a sleeve here, but I'm going to go from the shoulder down the sides first, walking the color in very softly. And then we'll be strengthening this. Up the other sleeve, shoulder, again, just stroking over it to keep it nice and soft. I'm going to come around the hand and sleeve that we have only a tiny bit of the sleeve showing, but I'm going to work around that for a shadow. And let me give this dry, and then we'll do the insides of the sleeves. So the inner edge of the sleeve against the body, and when we stroke that on, immediately you see you get this nice crisp line, which we're still going to give that a little tiny bit of a tint, but we want the sleeve to be darker because the shadow on it from her body. So when I float down that edge of the body, I'm going to have matte medium and just a tiny bit of color in my brush, which I've blended, so it's very, very soft. Just a very light tint to that edge. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other sleeve. I'm going to go upside down here. We're going to do the edge of the sleeve against the body. So we have that nice dark edge. And then just a pale float on her, the actual body of the dress. And I'm going to pull that in a bit. And then I'm also going to go around the neckline. Although we are going to give her some trim there, but we'll get a little shadow around this, which is actually going to be a shadow for the trim. On the other side of the sleeve. And the same thing, we'll have trim here, but I'm going to just put a little bit of the lush green on her sleeve also. And then our girl has her eyes closed while she's smelling the flowers. So I'm going to come back to the dried clay and I'm going to float beneath where her eyelashes are going to fall and just keep it soft. And then I'm going to float above her eyelids. To just define those. Okay, it's going to look a little odd at the moment, but once we put our eyelids on, it's all going to come together. And then coming back to her hair, I'm going to use dark chocolate and then I'm going to use soft black. So I'm going to put a little bit of each out on my palette. I'm going to float around the outer edges and the inner edges of her hair with dark chocolate just to start to get those at the round shape that we want. So we need the darker edges to push that back and give her some roundness there. Okay, same thing here on the inner edge of the hair. Okay, I'm going to go to a liner brush and start pulling some strands. And I'm going to just brush mix soft black and that dark chocolate together. And I'm just going to follow the curve of her hair on both sides. Just start pulling some little strands of hair through just to break up that big shape in the brown and to give us the idea that she's got strands of hair here. And just pulling some shorter strokes next to the part. Always following the shape of the hair. And then the same thing where it disappears here behind her head. I'm just going to pull some shorter strokes from here. You see how that really darkens and lets it travel away from us. You don't have to see every strand to know that it's hair. And I should let you know that I have water in my liner brush when I pull this. So while we use fluid matte medium for our floating. When it comes to something like your liner brush where you really need to have that flow, I do have water in my brush because we're not really getting water into the paper. It's just enough water to flow out of the brush. Now I'm following the very inner edge of that dark color. And I want to give her a few little wisps of maybe some hairs kind of falling out here at the top, like where her bangs would be. Just break up the edge. Can let a few little hairs fall out from the edges on the sides. Okay, just to soften that. And then I'm going to give this to dry before one final shading with the dark, soft black. Okay, and then with the soft black, what I want to do is shade down the part and just softly let that fade out. Can you see how, oh, that just does so much for us. And then the same thing here at the bottom, I'm going to just bring some soft black up from the bottom and just let it fade out. Okay, I'm going to flip my paper over and do the same thing on the other side. So our base coat color really becomes a highlight in many ways because we have that just glowing from below. That's what the matte medium does for us. And then I'm going to bring soft black just down a few of these wisps so it kind of creates sections in her hair. So first I'm going to give it another dry. Again with my matte medium, reloading in the soft black, and then I just want to follow a few of these curves on each side so that it just gives us some hair sections. And it doesn't really matter what side you go down. You can go from the top or you can do it from the bottom. You're going to create the shape of her hair when you add these floats. Okay, so there we have that. I'm going to boot out a little bit here. And then while we're here, I'm going to just go into Desert Turquoise, which mine has dried. So I'm going to just put a tiny little dot. And I'm using my liner brush. And I want to give her the collar and on her sleeve. And then with light buttermilk, we're just going to put a little bit of a highlight on her eyelids. Again, matte medium in my brush, and I'm just going to pick up a tiny bit of buttermilk, and I'm going to float this against that dark shading that we did behind the eyelids. So I'm actually going to float this on her eyelids just to brighten that up. And we are going to give her a nose, but we're not going to stress over the nose, okay? I'm going to, I have just this little flat brush, and let me see, I think this is the number 8. I have a little matte medium in my brush. I'm going to put color on just a tiny corner, and I'm just pushing up into the nostrils and then bringing a little bit of color down underneath her nose. around the nostrils. And this is just a tiny bit of color just to give an indication that we have nostrils here. And then in the warm beige that we used for her flesh color, I'm brush mixing a little bit of white. And I want to go against the shading with a tiny little bit of a C-stroke almost to create those the nostrils and the tip of her nose. So you can see it's a very slight indication of a nose. I don't want to go much darker, but I have some lettering here, so I am going to go around my nostril a little more. Also, so you can kind of see where it is a little bit better. And then with that dark blush and a very good amount of blending, I'm going to come down from her eye and just slightly down towards the nose, just to give an indication of where the sides of the nose would be. It only comes down a very little bit. You can do that on one side or you can do it on both sides. And then I'm going to put just a tiny drop of lamp black. I'm going to pick up soft black in my liner brush right here. And then I'm going to take a little bit of lamp black. I don't want to do her eyelashes so that they're stark black. So I'm making a little brush mix here of soft black and lamp black. I'm going to thin it down because I'm using my liner. You could also do this with your pigment pen. And we're just going to come along the bottom edge of each eye. And we're going to give her teeny tiny little eyelashes. Remember, she's the whimsy girl. We're going to keep these thin. And then while the light buttermilk is still open, I'm going to use my small stylus. And I'm just going to do little sets of 3 dots here and there on her dress for a little pattern. And I'm not even trying to make this symmetrical, just here and there. We want this to be loose. Just to give her a little pattern. And this is where we're going to leave her for now. I know we have it looks a little odd with her face unfinished, but if I just kind of cover here, you'll see how she's going to come together once the flower is there. Okay, go ahead and just cut mine out right now. You can do yours now or you can do it later. If you cut it now, just set her aside. And if you have things like your page number, you might want to keep those with her because it's fun to just include some little unexpected things when we're doing mixed media. And numbers are one of my favorites. And so since we have the book number there, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm using my little cutter bee scissors. I love these because they're sharp all the way to the point. And they really make this fine detail cutting a breeze. You can see I kind of did a rough cut first. It's a little easier when you have some of the excess paper out of the way. I'm going to do that again here in the neck area. Get rid of all of that. And just lay her on so we can get an idea. This is where she's going to be living in her beautiful garden. And so we're going to go from here. I'm going to keep my 200. That was my page number. I'll probably just collage that along the side or on a flower petal or something. And so this is where we're going to stop for the moment, and then we'll get going on our flowers. Okay, so my little lady is dry now. So what we're going to do is position her on the canvas, and we're going to adhere her with matte medium. So I have my line drawing just so I can just check the position. So I leave room for my flower. So she's not in the center, she's off centered because she's in this garden and we're going to have some large, beautiful flowers growing up around her. So we're going to kind of off center her. And then to balance it out, we have the ribbon, paper ribbon that's going over here on the left that's going to have our lettering on it. Okay. So once we have her positioned, we're going to use fluid matte medium to adhere her to the canvas. So I'm going to be using the fluid matte medium, and I have my little happy cup here. So I'm going to place some of my matte medium right into the cup. And what we want to do is put matte medium on the canvas and on the back of the paper. So I'm going to brush matte medium on my canvas, and I want to have an area that's a little larger than the paper that I'm putting down. So I just want to check the position here to make sure I have enough matte medium. And since we're adhering her down, I'm going to just turn my paper right over, brush the back. I'm not going to let it sit in place because I don't want to adhere it this way. Then I'm going to gently lift her up. And now position her on. Again, I want to leave room for my flower here. So she's a bit off-centered. Then I'm going to start to brush my paper down. And I'm always going to start in a center area and work my way out to the edges so that I don't trap air beneath the paper. If I were to start here on her sleeve, then I would have air in the middle of her body, and I don't want to do that. So I start in the middle, just pressing, pressing, pressing. And that way, as I brush, I'm pressing excess medium out, and also all that air. And then once I have her generally down, I'm going to take my finger and just gently rub over the paper all the way to the edge. And that way I can feel that there's no air, and I'm kind of squeegeeing out any excess matte medium, any air, and also I'm kind of sealing the edges of the paper down as I rub. Okay, so just give it a nice little rub. And then I'm going to take a clean brush and just stroke over the surface to smooth everything out. Get rid of any fingerprints, any ridges of matte medium. And there she is, already adhered down in her garden. So we're going to just need a few moments to let this dry, and then we're going to transfer some of the flowers that we're going to be painting right on the canvas with some of the background flowers. And then we've got a couple of daisies that we'll also collage on. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to let my canvas dry. I'll transfer my background flowers, and then we'll talk about the paper that we use for the daisies. So for the daisies, I've just used a an old page from a planner. This is not vintage. I wanted to use something that everybody probably could get in their stash. So if you don't keep last year's planner, you could maybe just go to a previous month of this year. And then usually on the page, they'll have a little mini calendar of the previous month and the following month. And so that's what I've chosen here. Kind of thinking, take time to smell the roses kind of means stop and enjoy life. And so we're putting our daisies on this little calendar. So I'm going to use buttercream to pull the petals, and then we're going to use buttercream tipped in white and pull them a second time for a little highlight. This is not going to show up very brightly on the paper because it has a white background, but once we cut the petals out, then it will show up. So this is probably going to be a little difficult for you to see in the video, but I'm just using my filbert brush, and I'm just going to put pressure down fully and then turn my brush so that I go from a thick to thin on the petal. I'm not sure I can zoom in any better on this one. Okay, hopefully you get a little peek of it here. So let me see if I can get my hand position. So I'm going to just push down. Well, this petal's got to be a little narrow one, but it's just putting pressure on at the start and then turning your brush. Okay, so this is going to be, that was the half daisy. This is the full daisy. Again, I'm just going to press, and as I pull, I'm lifting up pressure, and at the last minute, I'm turning my brush sideways so that the chisel of the brush makes that little narrow base. Okay, and so I'm going to just reload in the buttercream, and I'm just picking up white on the very tip of the brush, and I'm going to stroke through these again, and this is going to give a white highlight at the tip. I'm not even pulling this completely. I'm just letting the white go on the tip, and then I'm just sort of letting the stroke run out. And two more. Okay. For the centers, we already have sunny day. I want it darker yellow though, so I'm going to just brush mix a little milk chocolate in with the sunny day, just a little touch so that I get something maybe along the line of an antique gold or yellow ochre. And then I'm just going to base coat so the half petal, the center standing up, and then the full flower, we have a traditional kind of oval center. Okay, and that's all I'm going to do with this for now. We'll let that dry. And so I'm just going to transfer the lettering from the pattern packet, and I can see that I'm going to have her overlap a little bit of the S for the word flowers. That's okay. I'm fine with that. So I'm just going to position this so my lettering's up at the top, and I'm going to transfer it with transfer paper just like we normally would. And then I'm going to ink on top of it. Okay. Sometimes, often, when I'm doing a class, I will do the lettering and provide it as a transfer so you don't have to letter. Obviously, I'm not putting a kit together for you for this one, so let's do the lettering together, okay? I will make a copy of a calendar page with the lettering on it so that if you really, really get this far and do not want to try the lettering, you can cut this banner strip out from the pattern packet and collage the banner on, okay, from your printer paper. Okay. So we have stop and smell the flowers. And I'm playing around a little bit with the sizing. I had a lowercase m as I sketched this out. I'm going to change this to an uppercase M and an uppercase E. That'll be all set for you in your pattern packet, but I've kind of changed my mind about that as I'm working. And I didn't check to see that I was transferring okay. I usually do that right off the bat. I think it's okay. And then flowers, we're going to do cursive, kind of that modern calligraphy, or you can use your own handwriting. That's always beautiful. Okay. So this is my guide. I'm going to use my Tombow pigment pen. And I'm just going to go ahead. So stop and smell the, that's all going to be printed. I decided to do an O with a little dot underneath it just for something fun, something different. The and symbol, I'm going to just adjust my pressure here and there so I have some thick and some thin. And then the word smell will all be fine lettering. So I'm going to stay basically right up on the tip of my brush. And the word the, same thing here. Now flowers, you're going to be doing your upstrokes on the tip of the brush, and when you do a downstroke, you're going to put pressure. So the Tombow pen is a brush pen. The nib is flexible. So when I stay just up on the tip, I get a very fine line, and if I add pressure, I get a thicker line. So we combine those pressures to get letters that have thick and thins, okay? So as I write the word flowers, the F is going to be an upstroke until I hit that curve. And then as I pull down, I'm going to add pressure. Okay, and then when I do the L, up thin, down thick, the O, up thin, down thick. So every down, you're going to add pressure. Okay. And I'm going to dry this with my dryer and carefully erase. I have a few little stray marks here and I don't want those to come through. It's important to dry before you do any erasing, and also before we adhere this down with a matte medium, we want to dry it because you don't want your ink to bleed. It is pigment ink, but it needs to dry and cure for the ink to be permanent. So we're going to force it with the dryer. On my canvas, I've already transferred my flowers, and down here in the corner, I have a yellow flower. I'm going to use that same brush mix of the sunny day with a little milk chocolate. And I'm going to press and pull so I go from a thick to a thin. And this is sort of like a half opened flower, so we're only seeing the side petals. Okay. And then we have a little daisy here, which I'm going to wait because I'm thinking I possibly will put another filler daisy on the other side. So let's go to the next large flower. And this is going to be done in coral blush. I'm going to keep on using my filbert brush. You could go to a bigger filbert if you want to. This is just a little number 2 that I'm using. We have 3 back petals. And we have front petals. And this is just a base coat. And then we have the large flower on this side, which is going to be a mix of turquoise and white. And again, I'm just going to brush mix. I'm just going to pick up the blue in my brush, scoop in some white, and I'm just going to brush mix that. And you can see the lighter blue that I'm getting right there. And then we have the fern on this side. And for this one, I'm going to make almost a teal mix. I have some dried on my palette right here, so I just want you to see the color that we're going for. And so I'm going to take the desert turquoise. And this is going to be about a 2-to-1 mix, maybe even 3-to-1. So I'm going to put my lush green in a little on the slow side here. Let me put out the desert turquoise. And my lush green next to it. That might be even a little more. I'm going to pull some of that out and save it for the greenery or for the leaves and petals. Okay, so let me just go in here. And then I want this color to go on kind of transparent. I want the ferns to sort of be disappearing in the background. So I'm going to add a little matte medium. And I just want to really wash this color in. So when I stroke the first one on, I just want to see how transparent I am. And if I'm not happy with it, then I'll add more. And that's pretty good. If I'm pretty transparent, I'm going to tap it with my finger, lighten it up. And with the round brush, I can actually set the tip of my brush down and then just add pressure and I'll get that kind of round shape. Or I could use my filbert for this. So that was with the round brush and that gave me a little heavier color than I'm after. So I'm going to switch to my filbert so I can load this a little differently and let's see what we get here. So that's much better, much more transparent. So I don't have as thick of an amount of paint coming out. And the stem with my liner brush. And then I'm going to let a little small fern kind of come up from this side. Whoops, I'm zoomed in so far here. I want to just have a little bit of small fern coming on this side just to carry that color. Okay, zoom out now. So on this little yellow flower that we have a bit of, I'm going to just go into my matte medium, I'm going to pick up a little bit of milk chocolate on the toe, and I just want to tint the base of these petals with milk chocolate. And these do run together at the bottom, so you can just kind of go across. Usually I want to treat each petal individually, but these are forming a kind of a closed flower, so I'm going to just kind of tap this color in along the whole bottom of the flower. For the pink flower, I want to add my highlighting first and then separate with my shading color. So I'm going to highlight with white. And I just want to go across the top of each petal. Zoom in here. So we have the 3 back petals. And then I want to hit the top edge of each of the front petals. So there's 4 front petals. The furthest one to the left is going to have a shadow so that we get the rounded shape. So the middle petals, I can put a highlight down. So I'm just going to put that in right now. And then on the blue flower, I'm going to also be using white. So I'm just going to push white along that back edge. That's 1 large petal in the back. I'm going to push, wiggle, so you get a little shape happening here, more natural. And then again, my left and right petals, I want to put shading down so it rounds out the flower. So I'm just going to have a highlight on the front petal. Just softly add that highlight on. It will all come together once we add our shading in. And then on the little yellow flower, we'll come back to that one and add white highlighting on those petals as well. Just doing the tips. Again, petals in the center, I can bring the white down a little bit. I want to get a deeper color in the coral blush flower. So I'm going to use Heritage Brick. I'm going to brush mix a little coral blush and the Heritage Brick together so it marries the 2 colors. So I'm going to pick up coral blush first, and then I'm going to start blending, and then a little of the Heritage Brick. See how that softens out the color? And then I'm going to come into my matte medium just so I get some nice flow. And let's go ahead and do the inside of the flower first. So this is going to go right up against the top of those front petals. And this is a good time to create shape. You can push down in between them to create that space. Okay. And I need to let this dry. I think I can sneak down this left or the right side, and I'll separate the second petal in. And I probably can sneak same thing here. We're going to separate these petals with the same mix. And we'll also use it for our shading. Okay, so let's give this a dry and then we'll finish shading this flower. Again, just separate. And I'm still using the dirty brush, but by reloading now, I'm getting it darker. I'm reloading in just the heritage brick, and I want to go down the left and right sides here to really give a darker shadow there. And I'm still using my matte medium. You could also use glazing medium here for your floating. Okay, I'm going to strengthen the inside a bit more. And then pull this color up just a bit so all of the base of the petals has been darkened. And then I will strengthen the highlights. Let me tip this up for you. I'm going to dry one more time and then I'm going to strengthen the highlights. Okay, in our blue flower, we're going to go back to the desert turquoise and we're going to do basically the same thing. I'm going to just float down my left and right sides with the desert turquoise. I'm going to pull this right along the base of the large petal. Okay, and then I can't really come over to this one yet, but I can sneak in the top. And I'm going to try to tuck in behind there. And I'm going to come upside down and just pull a little veining. And I did not bring in the stem on my fern on this side, so I can go ahead and do this now. And then back to our yellow flower, I'm just going to separate between these petals. This is with the milk chocolate again. And then finally back to my little filbert, and I'm going to pull those little small daisies. This is going to match what she's holding in her hand. So these are quite little. And again, these are kind of fading in our background. They're not going to be super bright, and we're not going to worry about that. There's going to be a hint of them there, and that's just going to carry through the idea of shows show. So I'm going to just do a little small one here. And then the same thing up a little higher. I'm just going to give these a little dot center. And this is the same. It's the sunny day with just a little of the milk chocolate just to darken that color a bit. So just that little bit of a center. And then let's go to a round brush and we'll just get our stems. I'm going to use a small round brush for this. And I'm going to continue with that tealy green color, but I want to green this up a little bit more. So I'm going to take my lush green and just come into it. So see how that's changing my green? Okay. So I just want to put a stem down for my blue flower. We only see a little of this here. The pink flower has a little bit of a cup. So we're just going to trace the bottom of the flower. Nice thin line. And pull that down on a bit of curve. And then same with our yellow flower, we're going to curve that another direction. And this one has a leaf. I'm just going to use my round brush. I'm going to start on the tip and then add pressure as I pull. So I go from thick to thin. Just a few little leaves here. Okay, let's come to our daisies that we did on the paper. Zoom back out a bit here. And we're going to cut these out with our detail scissors. And we'll get them adhered and we'll add our final details right on the canvas, okay? So we wanted this daisy to be right up in the face, and that's why we didn't put the mouth or anything on, because we want her to be smelling it. And then the other one kind of down here on the shoulder. So let's go ahead and adhere these down with our matte medium. So I'm doing it the same way. Make sure you have enough matte medium to cover the area that you're collaging on so that you don't have a bare spot underneath, a dry spot. And then brush it down and then squeegee it out with your finger. And I'm just going to add a little extra matte medium under those petals to be sure I got everything. Brush it down, press it down with your fingertip and squeegee it out. And then I'm going to smooth everything out. Getting there. Now, next we're going to do the banner up at the top and the lettering strips down here at the bottom. Okay, so I'm sure that by now I had put up a big red stop sign in the video and in your pattern packet instructions, a big warning to not adhere down the top of her head. as I was filming it, as you know by now, I had adhered down her whole head, and I forgetting that I wanted to put the banner down so that her head's kind of overlapping so we get some extra dimension here. So you won't have the problem that I have just run into because, of course, you read your pattern packet and you had all of the warnings in the video that are not there yet, but will be by the time you watch this. So I'm going to show you, though, the solution. So you can see my banner has a little divot. My first thought was just cut my banner out around the top of her head and fit it on, but I really wasn't happy with that. It was not easy to get it exact. So I have a long darning needle that I always keep on my table when I'm doing mixed media. It's great for picking up little pieces. It's great for a multitude of uses, but I wanted to show you, I just eased the point underneath her head and just kept working away until I was able to lift the top of the paper. And you can see there's a little bit of layer of paper that is adhered down, but this is enough to let me slide my banner under. And I thought, well, since I've made this mistake, I'm going to show you the fix because you might run into something like this. So it's just ever so gently sliding the tip of the needle at the edge, and then you just keep tapping, tapping, tapping. And bit by bit, you'll free up the paper. I don't need to go any deeper, but I want to do this so that you can see. I'm just working my way across. Okay, so see how I've now freed up even more. And so you could keep working down if you needed to go deeper. Thankfully, I only needed to go down about this much. I'm going to use my white eraser. And it's just going to pick up my stray transfer lines and my stray pencil. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to come back to my girl and refresh my matte medium here. So this is going to tuck underneath her head. So again, I'm going to put matte medium down a larger area than what I have paper going down so I don't have any dry spots. And I'm going to snug that all the way underneath that little part of her head. And then brush the back of the paper. And this time you notice I did not turn that over and let it really soak in the medium, and that's because the ink is so fresh. Now I just want to make sure that two things. I want to make sure that I'm low enough for her head to cover that spot that I cut. You won't have that problem. And so the primary thing that you're going to watch is the top of your banner so that you're nice and straight with the top of the canvas. So I'm just going to adjust this so that I'm straight all the way across. And brush your paper into place. Again, squeegee with your finger. A little of my ink is coming up. I'm just going to brush that away. It's fine. And now I want to get medium on the back side of her hair so that that will go now right over the top. And then you're going to smooth that all out. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and coat the whole canvas. Okay, so remember I said we were just putting down the background daisies, and the daisies on the paper, we're going to let things get details as we go. So now let's put in some of those details. So I want to tip my brush in white and again, just sort of highlight the tips of the daisy petals on these background flowers. And again, it's just touching the tip and pulling in and letting that paint run out. Okay, so see the difference between this daisy and this daisy, how it makes it pop? But I'm not stroking the whole petal white, just hitting those outer edges. So it's just a little highlight there, but it defines the shape of the petal for us. So I'm going to do that to all three. And then I'm going to strengthen the highlighting on the daisies that we collage on. Same way, I'm just going to hit those outer edges and let it just run out. We are going to pull some little fine white stamens from both the pink flower and the blue one. These are just whimsy flowers, so they don't exist in real life. They exist in our imagination, which means there's no right or wrong to them. Just going to keep these lines very fine. And then I want to touch a little dot of white on the tip of each one. Zoom in so you can see those. And then the same thing on this blue one. I'm trying to be a little careful because my matte medium is still a little bit sticky on the banner, so I don't want to tear anything. And then tip the white dot. And around the little yellow flower, I'm just going to put some little dots sprinkling out around it. And I think I'm going to do that on the other flowers too, so it's all consistent. Can even sprinkle a few little dots in your daisies. And with these daisies, I want to shade around the base of the petals and put a little divot in the center, the flower center. So I'm going to leave that for just a moment. Let's see, we can put our stems on though. So she's holding these flowers, right? So we want to just bring our stems down to her hand. You can just use the lush green for this, or you can add just a little touch of the desert turquoise to tone it again. I'm going to add just a smidge because I like the way it kind of greens that up. And also we use lush green as her shading color on her dress, so this gives us something a little bit different. So I'm going to use my liner and just pull these little thin stems. And then we're going to give these some little leaves too, the same way that we did the leaves on the other flowers, but we're using our liner brush. So we're starting on the tip and then add pressure and back to the point. So you go thin, thick, thin again. And then to finish up the daisies, we're simply going to float milk chocolate with matte medium in the brush so that it's transparent again. So it's just a tint of milk chocolate. We're going to go around the base of the petals. So right around that flower center. And then without thinning the paint, I'm going to pick up just a little milk chocolate on the tip of that brush, and I want to do a little divot in the center. So let's just zoom in here. We're going to do this kind of like a little C stroke. So I'm just going to push up and around. Okay, so right here we created that one. This one might be a little wet to do. I'm going to just try to sneak it in here. And now that that's on, we can add our little white dots around these daisies also. Let's make sure we're dry enough. And then we have word strips that are going to go down here in the corner. And it says, picking flowers and chasing dreams. So you can stamp these on, you can letter them on, you can ransom note them on from a book page or from a dictionary. You could pick each word from the dictionary. That's totally up to you. I'm going to pause the video for just a moment and get mine ready, and then we'll come back and collage that element on, and then we'll finish her up. In the lower right corner of the canvas, we have the words picking flowers and chasing dreams. Um, I'm not sure if everyone has a small set of stamps, so I did go ahead and scan this. And if you print your e-packet out, you can cut out the words and collage them right from your pattern packet along with the banner up here at the top if you want to. There are patterns for the banner and you can hand letter it. That'd be wonderful. But if you don't want to do the hand lettering, you can cut it out, print it, and collage it on. Same with the quote down here. But I wanted to show you what I'm using is a making memories set of magnetic alphabet. And so there's a little handle that you put your words on, of course, backwards. And so you just put on whatever you want and you line it up on the line. And then I use Ranger Archival ink to stamp. It is, as you can see right here on the stamp pad, acid-free, permanent, and waterproof. So just like the pigment pen, once I had stamped my lettering, I just used my heat tool to dry and cure the ink before applying it. So this is just one option. You want something small so that it fits down here. This is about 2 inches worth of lettering. If you don't have stamps this small, you could cut the words out from a dictionary page and then kind of ransom note them on. You could look for words in a book, same thing, and just cut them out individually. Or like I said, to make it easy on you, I did go ahead and scan it so you can print it right out from your pattern packet. So the few little details that are left, my camera quit and I didn't realize I wasn't recording. So the only thing that we really have left, you can see there are a couple of white curly cues on here. That's done with a liner brush. Of course, this lettering, which you'll collage that on the same way we did the banner. Okay. And then when everything is dry, you can see a few little black accents here. So I use my pigment pen and I pulled these little tiny accent. They're not really flowers, but they're kind of accent doodles. And then around the calyx of the blue flower, there's a little bit of black doodle work here. And then just here and there in the background, I put a few little swirls. And then all of the dip dots that we did in white have a little bit of black sprinkled around it just to give a little extra depth. And then we had already given our girl her eyelashes and she needed some little fine eyebrows, so those were added on also. So everything else we covered in the video. And here we have the finished project. And I hope you enjoyed painting this, whether for yourself or to gift it to someone special. I hope this was a fun project for you. I know I sure enjoyed painting it, and I was um, excited to display it in my own home. You know, by now I have my tiered tray, and I love to put my canvases in the tiered tray and some decorations around it. So I have some floral things going in for May, and that's exactly where my little canvas is going to go. So once you've had a chance to paint it, I'd love to see yours posted in the Toll Town group and show off where you display it. That'd be fun to see also. So again, thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.